Here. Welcome everybody, fellow Rotarians, Rotarian friends, to this month's Club Learning webinar. My name is Rick Eisted. I'm a proud member of the Rotary Club of Calgary Fish Creek. Could I get somebody to mute, please? Yes, so I'm also on the District L&D Committee, responsible for these monthly Club Learning webinars. I want to thank everybody for spending your time with us this evening, because I know we all live busy lives. Tonight's webinar is all about helping refugees. What can we do to basically ensure that they're looked after once they arrive in our province and in our district? I think this is a very important topic, and without doubt, it's very relevant when we consider the number of refugees that are coming in to Alberta from the Ukraine alone. This webinar tonight is scheduled for 1.5 hours. You will note that your audio and your video has been turned off. So we'd encourage you to use the chat button to communicate with each other. And you can do it direct or you can do it for everybody. But please use the Q&A button to ask questions. We will be monitoring those as we go through. So with that, I'd like to turn this session over to Judy Bopp. Judy is a member of the Rotary Club of Cochrane, and she's also the chair of our district Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So Judy, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Rick. And I just want to say thank you also for helping with all the technical background to making this really work. And a special thank you and welcome to the panelists, but also all of you who have come to share in this evening's learning. We're going to have the program. We have 4 presentations, and then we have a Q&A time. Now I'm going to try to keep track of your questions that you put in the chat, and if there's something very particular that pertains to what somebody has just spoken about, we'll take a few minutes for that. But in general, we're going to keep the questions until after the 4 presentations, so that all of you have a chance to share your experiences, share what you want to share without us feeling so scrunched for time. So we're hoping that will give us about half an hour for sharing from the participants and Q&A time. In the meantime, you can see on your screen, you'll be able to see our panelists for tonight. And I again want to thank everyone for agreeing to participate and to share. We're going to kind of move through the evening with Mohammed Idris, who works in this field and really has a good handle on the whole context and the whole what is happening, to share about how did this happen that we were able to accept so many newcomers, Ukrainian newcomers, what the whole process was, what was happening with the federal government policies and so on. So we're going to start with that. So just that we have the proper context and we can understand more clearly, because this is different than the refugee programs that we have normally in Canada. So Mohammed, please feel free to say anything about your work, what you do, and then share with us this context that will help us understand more clearly.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you all for being here. This is such an important topic. And as Rotarians, many of us are Rotarians, and some of our friends here, we have committed ourselves to helping those who are in need and to make our communities and the world a better place, a safer place for everyone. And what's happening in Ukraine is such a atrocity that we can't not do something about it. I was just trying to find out some numbers, and the UNHCR believes that there are now actually 4.8 refugees from Ukraine, 4.8 million refugees from the States that have left the Ukraine, and they are all over the world. Many are in many places around Europe, and some have crossed to Canada here in the States, in other places. There is also 7.1 million internally displaced Ukrainians. Imagine the number, 7.1 million internally displaced Ukrainian, people who have lost their homes, people who have fled from areas to areas that are maybe not safer, but less riskier than where they were. So together, we are actually talking about somewhere around 12 or more million who have been impacted by what's happening in their country, in their home country. The federal government very early on looked at a number of different options in how to be involved, how to have some sort of a support that they can provide, and figured out that our regular refugee program is not the right program for this situation. Just to give you an idea, we have two main refugee programs. We have the government-assisted refugees, and then we have the privately sponsored refugees in Canada. The government-assisted refugees are people that the government brings from many places around the world, and they support for a year. And the privately sponsored refugees are refugees that are sponsored by church groups, community groups, different organizations, and again, they are supported for a year. The average processing time for a refugee from, let's say, the minute that either the government or a group in Canada decides that they would like to sponsor that person to Canada, for that person to come to Canada, is 2 to 3 years. This is something that another issue we need a different date and a different time to talk about. But imagine that there are people who have been living in refugee camps around the world for 7 years, 8 years, longer than that, trying to find that one person or one agency or one government that will sponsor them and bring them to a safer place. So Canada introduced this program that will address this immediate need we have, and it's called the Canada Ukraine Emergency Travel Authorization. Canada Ukraine Emergency Travel Authorization. And basically, it's a temporary program, a temporary visa for Ukrainians that will allow them to come to Canada immediately and have at least a 2 years stay in Canada. That could be extended, that could be changed to a different program, so they could come here and then find another program that will give them the permanency once they are here. But basically, this is really a temporary visa that will allow them to immediately leave the Ukraine, any country that they're around there, and then come to Canada. Even our temporary resident visa application in Canada normally takes a couple months sometime in regular time. If someone wanted to visit Canada, or if someone wanted to come and study or work in Canada, it normally takes few months. But the government was hoping this program that they did for the Ukrainians will be about 6 weeks. They have streamlined it, took out many different requirements. They kept only the security screening and the biometrics and things like that. Medicals were taken off. Proof of funds were taken off. Proof of tie to the country that you are coming. Look, many things were taken off the requirements. As of the end of June, 356,500 applications have been received under this program. I'll repeat the number, 356,500 applications have been received. Out of those, 148,200 applications have been approved. So still, the government wanted to process this faster, but still we are really not as fast as we thought it will be. And one of the main reasons is that there was still a need for an appointment to come to a visa center and do one step, which is the biometrics, taking these fingerprints and that. So this couldn't be taken because of some security reasons. So you have to find a place that can give you an appointment to go in. Some is in Warsaw in Poland. Some of the other countries around Ukraine has these visas, Canadian visa centers. So that is one of the reasons that actually delayed the process. When I checked a couple of weeks ago, if you are trying to book an appointment to do that step, it will the nearest appointment will be about 6 weeks ahead, just to get that appointment and do that. So this is why one of the reasons that the delay happened in the process. So I said a little bit over 356,000 have been submitted applications, and a little bit over 148,000 have been approved. As of July 4th, Alberta have received 3,833 Ukrainians under this program. 3,833 individuals have arrived in Alberta under this program. In general, in Canada, they are saying there is about 500 Ukrainians arriving under these programs every day almost. That is the average number of daily arrivals within Canada. I mentioned this in the beginning, and I want to repeat this again. The code is not a permanent solution. The code is a temporary solution that the government believed that will address the immediate need we have now, take them out of the danger, bring them here, and then they will settle here. Many different things were not thought of in the beginning of the program, although we are thinking about these things and we are correcting some of these things as we go. For example, where are they going to stay when they arrive here? What about their healthcare? In the beginning, many provinces didn't have Ukrainians approved for healthcare. How about financial assistance and things that to do normally when we receive a refugee? All of these things have been thought about, and we had 2-3 years to think about it and prepare it. So it's not that but with the Ukrainians, all of that in the beginning was not thought about. So I believe Alberta was one of the earlier provinces that actually allowed the healthcare number to be able to be applied for. But as of, for example, as of now, is still Ukrainians are not qualified for provincial financial support here in Alberta till July 25. July 25 will be the date that Ukrainians will be able to access provincial financial support, the welfare system, as well as the childcare system that was announced just last week. And even when they announced it last week on July 5th, they said this will kick in on July 25th. The federal government recently, and when I say recently, maybe a few weeks now, have introduced a financial support program federally that gives Ukrainians 3,000 per adult and 1,500 per every child in the family. 30,000, and this is, I think this is stat is about a week old. 30,240 applications have been received for that assistance, and I think that the approval process is very quick for that program. I believe that out of the 30,000, I heard 24 or 25,000 have been approved, and money has been in the bank accounts. But again, one other thing was that for Ukrainians to be able to apply for that, they had to have a bank account. So again, do they have the right documents to open a bank account was a question sometimes that people have struggled with. 13,000 SIN applications have been received, social insurance number. And again, that is another thing. For example, the government said when they arrive under this program, they can get a work permit. Okay. So they get the work, they get the work permit, and then they are able to get the SIN, and then they are able to work. But the thing is that we said especially from the Ukrainian perspective, they were not allowing men to leave. So most of the people who are leaving are women and children. So how are we going to address childcare if we are going to ask this single mother to go and work? How are we addressing other needs when we said, oh, this program is allowing you to work? So all of that wasn't thought about, but now step by step, they are thinking about that and trying to address that. I have to say, one of the things that we have learned in this, and we have seen in this program, is the amount of community engagement, in the amount of sympathy that people had with the Ukrainians in wanting to help. Early on, I think in February or March, different groups have come together in small communities, church groups, sometimes even just volunteers who are not connected to any organizations have come together and try to do fundraising, to do finding housing, finding all of that. And that really supported a lot, but also created some sort of confusion sometimes, where to send who and how to manage that. There was a huge corporate support as well. WestJet, Air Canada, American Express, Airbnb, Uber, all of these big organizations, big corporations wanted to be part of this. And there is actually many, for example, Amex now have hotels in Calgary, Vancouver, in Toronto for people for 14 days if they arrived without housing. There are organizations that are managing that. One thing I want to also add, there is actually and this actually have been just formalized, I think about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago. Now there is actually an agency in some airports that are supposed to be welcoming Ukrainians. So for Alberta, for the Calgary airport is Calgary Catholic Immigration Society. They have a partnership with the Calgary Airport Authority, and they are now inside in the security area in the airport. And they have welcome packages in they work with arrivals in Calgary. So if, for example, a group of volunteers have someone coming and they know that they are coming on this day, they can connect with CCIS and do that. In Edmonton, it is Catholic Social Services. So they are the welcoming agency in Edmonton, and in Toronto, it's the Canadian Red Cross. So again, if you have a Ukrainian group arriving and you know that their point of entry, and point of entry means the first airport they will land in Canada, these are organizations that are available in these airports to support that. One more thing I want to add is the idea of rural versus urban in terms of the arrivals. We have seen that in the urban situations, there are sometimes a lot of services, a lot of resources, maybe sometimes not organized and not smoothly done, but there is a lot going on, especially, for example, in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, that in smaller areas, it is really on the back of volunteers, on the back of church groups, on the back of one main organization, maybe that has to do with the newcomers in that community. So coordination is very important. Coordination is working very well, but sometimes resources are not as available as in bigger communities, and we can talk about that a little bit later. One of the trends we are seeing in the recent arrivals compared to, for example, people who arrived early on in April and in May, that the recent cohorts have more needs and complex needs versus and I think about it and I think about the fact that maybe those who arrived in the beginning were people who are already connected, already know how to do things, and they quickly got their visas and quickly they are connected with someone here and there. While those who are arriving now recently are the lowest in the socioeconomic, the people who didn't know where to go or who didn't have the resources to connect with different groups and do that. And that will impact the service providers in the groups that are working with them. Housing is going to be a major need, and it started already to show, especially in the bigger cities, in Toronto, for example, and some other bigger cities. They use actually even university dorms and things like that. Now, all of that coming September will go back to being used for other things. So that will be an interesting or a challenging situation that we are going to have to deal with. I heard yesterday that there are some talks with Rotary International to use the high school exchange program for unaccompanied minors. it looks like there are a good number of unaccompanied minors that are leaving the Ukraine in arriving in Canada. In the respect people have for Rotary and the Rotary Exchange Program and all of that care that we do about youth and youth safety and the risk assessment and the risk mitigations that we do to take care of these young youth is something that I believe now is recognized. So the Canadian Ukrainian Congress is talking to Rotary International to see if there is a possibility to use the high school exchange program for unaccompanied minors while they are here in Canada. I want to finish with,
we're at the 15-minute mark.
So I want to finish with one sentence.
That's fine. I just wanted, I know that you're in midstream here and this is really great stuff, but please go ahead.
So the one sentence I wanted to finish with, I actually wanted to remind all of us that 69% of refugees around the world come from 5 countries: Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, and Venezuela. I think it's exciting and it's really good what we are doing with the Ukrainian situation. But I think we need to remember that. We need to remember that refugee is not a Ukrainian situation issue. It is a global issue that as Rotarian we should think about and see what we can do with. Thank you.
Thank you. That was just a lot of amazing information that you've shared, Mohammed, and I'm sure that there will be questions at the end and comments. So thank you so much. And you actually do have a very good pace there. You finished up very promptly. Jerry, you're up next, and we're thrilled to have you to talk about really, whatever you feel is relevant, but I think as Rotarians, we're interested in your experience from the point of view of the Calgary North Club, and your work with the Calgary Stampede Park Club. But just, on the ground, how this is shaping up for you, what you're learning, what's happening, and so on. So thank you so much for coming, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. What can I say? I've been part of this program since it started and the evacuees began leaving. So I've had guests in my house since end of March. Okay. I didn't start out trying to do anything. It just happened to get a phone call from someone in immigration from Ottawa that I've known and said, could you get involved and see what you can do? So I got in with my eyes closed. But anyway, in this whole process, there are 1,000 perspectives, okay? And I think a lot of people are coming online and coming on stream as they're becoming aware. Now we do have, and by that I also mean government agencies. But I would say this much. It came on the government agencies so rapidly that they never got their act together. In other words, the actions and items they intended to do good, nothing would fit with reality. And so in between the cracks were the real people coming here. No homes, very few guest homes, obviously not, other than having a work visa in their hand when they got through the airport, there was very little on the ground from an official perspective, okay? And so we often hear about a lot of the not-for-profits and volunteer groups. They were technically forced in, because the gap was so big. I remember the first week or so making phone call after phone call from immigration to UCC and on, and the more I called, the more I realized they had an official line, but very little value. Okay? Now, that was a while back. Since then, we've all had a chance to immerse our heads in the issue. Okay? And so now, if a family comes in, they've just recently closed the welcome desk at Calgary, but they've also just recently closed the one in Edmonton. Okay? But they're still coming in via either the official meaning the program that Ottawa put on, or the unofficial meaning Family Connection. Okay? And you can see the discrepancy. I see Mohammed has some numbers. I get these numbers every week, officially out of Ottawa and from the Alberta government. When you start to see Alberta government numbers were here last week, in excess of 5,000 are in Alberta, but what's somewhat surprising is there's about 500 more registered with Alberta Health than there are that are registered that came to Alberta. So what I'm saying there is that you're beginning to see that the two streams, the numbers sometimes don't match, but that's why. Okay. Very quickly, I realized that there are a lot of people in the community that are very good at one specific thing. Okay. And so I met with 22 different not-for-profit organizations, from Professional Ukrainian Association, the different church groups. On my brochure, I think some of you saw our brochure that I had, okay? I listed quite a few that we're working with, and they're predominantly delivering services. And generally speaking, each one is specialized in a narrow area. Okay, in other words, not everything, but you can go to the different websites and look at where do I get help for SIN, Alberta Healthcare help. This is the process. Where do I go about getting a driver's license? This is the process. And so you can pick out on the website an awful lot of skill sets that you would need if you're going to maneuver a family through the red tape. Okay. Now, what did we do? We started with Calgary. I actually started before I took this to Rotary because I was maneuvering some families through the system. And I wrote a bit of a manual up to help people work their way through step by step by step. Okay. And I didn't always follow what I would call the rules of the game. If you tried that, you would have to pull every hair out of your head. For example, when you apply for a SIN number, what do they ask you to do? You go online, you get out the application, and you book an appointment. Do you know how long that takes? If you do it a little differently, you can do it in one day. But you have to kind of figure the system out. And so many of these not-for-profits have worked out how to very effectively and efficiently move through the process. First SIN, then Alberta Healthcare, and homes, and so on. Now, there's a very good group that does an evaluation for private residences. Our Rotary Club just put in $5,000 to keep them going. Now, so what did our Rotary Club then take on? We didn't want to deliver any of these services. Okay, we never came on stream to say we can do something better. What we did say is, what you're good at, we'll help you do. Okay, and so we are supplying funds. I just give you some statistics. I think as of Monday, we had distributed well over $55,000 in support, and another 20,000 in checks sit in our shelves. We are anticipating to raise somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million. Now, what do we do with that? If some people come in with they need medical care that don't qualify for Alberta Health, well, we have pitched in. Okay, let's take Mount Royal University. We partnered with another organization in town, a church. They put up 20,000, we put up 20,000. There is English as a second language program that's beyond the Alberta program, which they have now running, but you can't get in until next September. So we've got a parallel one running, and between us and two private companies, we're financing it. I can go on and on and on, showing you examples. I see Mary there in the corner in my screen. She brought a family in and she needed some help financially. We take requests from groups that need support. And that's how we addressed it, okay? Now, Calgary Stampede has joined us, and we have a communications team set up that's doing some marketing. We have a fundraising team. We have a team that evaluates the requests, but we also have two foundations, ours and Calgary South, that takes in funds not only from individuals, because we issue tax receipts, as you're aware, okay? So we can handle the tax receipts. We can handle and take care of the accounting for what we call corporate matching funds. A good example there will be interprovincial pipeline. Every dollar a staff member donates, the corporate makes a donation. So we have worked with groups not to replace them, but to accentuate what they can deliver. And so every Wednesday, normally this time, we meet, those that want to meet in person, we meet in St. Vladimir's Church, and the rest meet on Zoom, and we look at the crisis for the past 10 days, and what are we going to do? So for a while there, it was buying diapers, okay? Now that we're moving families into homes, one of our members has a 20,000 square foot warehouse donated by Pinnacle Finance that is passing, we're collecting enough for 3 apartments a week for furniture. And so we got a delivery truck coming in and going out constantly. So these are the little facets. Now, when you put them all together, they become quite important. Now, how does a person know how to access what they need? Well, there are several apps out there showing you if you need furniture, you can go here. If you need additional medical care, here are 3 doctors, and here's where we can get it done in a more economical fashion. So there is a blueprint for almost every question out there. And obviously, we don't want to be the funder of first resort. What we want to be is the funder of last resort, of the people falling between the cracks. Okay, and there are a lot in between the cracks. They don't fit the timeline, or we've had a family that was in a hosted family and they got kicked out. Now what do you do with them? So we have an emergency team that takes care of that. So we have helped set up an accentuated delivery system, and we're really actually trying to empower the community. Now, this is the first time we're looking at this from a district level, okay? And working with Mary and Olds is one of our first trial runs. We've got 2 others going where we're trying to encourage either a local church group or a local Rotary club or a local Lions club to become the center. And we can help them with, number 1, advice on in any section, how to apply for the federal government one. I'm aware of the provincial ones because I sit on that weekly board meeting with the Alberta government. So I keep in tune what's happening there. So we can help them maneuver through whether it's the provincial and federal regulations, whether it's healthcare needs within the scope or outside the scope. Within, I mean, they fall within the rules of Alberta healthcare, but if you happen to have an emergency dental case, you fall outside the care. The medical care for the federal government immigration program falls outside of Alberta healthcare, not inside of Alberta. That could be as high as $500. So there are many little holes that these people fall through. Housing has been a very big problem, but so is English language. Okay, we've got several schools operating. There's a class going on right now at St. Vladimir's, okay? Helping people get driver's licenses. Keep in mind that most of them are fairly well educated, but they cannot practice their profession in this country. Okay, keep that in mind. it's extremely rare to practice your profession. My guests, a master's degree in psychology and an electrical engineer. Tell me what they're going to do in Calgary. Okay, one is doing nails and the other is going to work in construction. In the meantime, we're looking for them to see if they can upgrade and get their accreditation. But the reality is they're well educated. I think I got the stats from the Alberta government just the other day. 57% have a master's or a bachelor of the Alberta residents. 57%. And the percent of that group that are actually getting a job in their field is just about zero because of the, well, understand what a PIGA with engineering, if you're a teacher, you understand the school system. So we need to accommodate jobs that they can do that aren't within their profession, but they may then transition to their profession. So these are the practical problems. They're not insurmountable, but they sure can wear you down. Okay, I've probably made every mistake you can. Believe me. Okay, I mean I've been giving from driving lessons to tomorrow. I'm meeting with the executive of a group downtown. Friday I'm taking a group down for driver's tests and practice. So it can wear you down, but you know. We have a rather strong volunteer community, not just in Calgary, but in our rural area. And if you talk to I've talked to several small communities and said, what would you need to get organized? They need something like, Judy, what you're doing. What is a little bit of a guideline and where do we get help? Number two, if we get donors within our town, how can we have them handle the accounting? Well, we've got Calgary South and us have really good accounting systems to keep track of every donation, whether it's matched or unmatched, or whether it needs a tax receipt or not. And those funds then go right back to the community. But if a community member in Okotoks knows that they can get a tax receipt, they're more likely to give a donation. So you have to cross all these little, if you're going to open that community up, okay? And I think there's a very good blueprint out there. It's not perfect for every community because everyone hasn't got an old college to employ them, okay? But I honestly believe if we don't do what you're doing now, okay, the two cities cannot handle the influx, okay? We may be seemingly to manage it, but Mohammed said a comment. We're going to be emptying the university dorms. We've just rented all of Mount Royal University student dorms until the end of August. But we know we've got to move them out. I have two full floors in a high rise that I have a rental agreement on. As soon as I get an occupancy permit, I can probably handle another 100 people. Okay. But as soon as you got them full, you got two more plane loads here, and the problem is just as big as you had last week. The only thing that changed was the face, you know? So, I mean, I'm just saying I'll help where I can. And I think a lot of people are stepping up. And that's what really makes you feel good about this thing.
Jerry, thank you so much. That's an amazing story. And it's not the end of it. We need to hear more from you over time. And I'm sure people here who are hearing this you'll get more gray hairs or more pulling out more hairs because people are going to be coming to you for advice. And so we're really thrilled to have you here, Mary. You're on the receiving end. You're right on the grassroots of doing this stuff. So please share your experience and then we'll hear from another community because we know that the situation is different in smaller communities than it is in the big cities. So please, Mary, go ahead.
Thank you, Judy. And I really appreciate this evening's opportunity to share what we've learned and to learn from each other. I've already learned so much from Mohammed and Jerry just tonight. I'm taking lots of notes, so I really appreciate the conversation. I'd like to acknowledge Peter Premichuk, who's on the call tonight. He's a Rotarian from our Rotary Club in Olds, and it really started with Peter in our community. And it came very, very innocently. It came from an email from a distant relative of his in the Ukraine who'd always wanted to come to Canada, and now the time and the urgency was more real than ever before. From the time Sonia first reached out to Peter in February, she and her sister and their 2 husbands and their 3 children all arrived in Olds early May. I think like lots of us, we walked into this with our eyes totally closed. We had no idea what we were going to get into, but as Rotarians, we wanted to provide that safe haven for our neighbors that were under such stress and duress in their home country as things were unfolding. Peter graciously opened up his basement to house these 7 new family members that he had found through an email chain. And before you know it, we were able to find rented housing in our community so that the 2 families could stay together, which was just incredible. The community of Olds has really come together in so many kinds of ways. Since their arrival, like Jerry and Mohammed both talked about, the paperwork, the documentation is something that requires a lot of time, a lot of energy. I've made a lot of mistakes myself, as we've learned from others and from talking to many people at what should be done properly. Like, you know, you go and get your social insurance number first. In a rural community, things are very different than in an urban center. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the resources that you might find in your rural community. I don't know how many of us on the line tonight are from rural centers, but just wanted to share a little bit about what happened in Olds, and maybe this could be replicated in your community. Like Jerry said, fundraising has been a huge part of what's happened in Olds. Being a smaller community, word spread quickly about Sonia and her family coming to Olds from the Ukraine. And it was before she even arrived in Canada that Peter was interviewed locally on our radio station and in our newspaper, talking about the situation in the Ukraine and Sonia's imminent arrival. And I don't have the figures right in front of me, but thousands of dollars were raised from people all across our community. They would come into Peter's office and drop off checks. People in town were talking about them, and they drop off checks to Rotarians to come to Peter's office. So it's been a very, very generous community. We've partnered with our local municipality. The municipality is very keen on helping them in any way that they can. The food bank has certainly stepped up. The secondhand stores in town for clothing have certainly opened their doors to support our newcomers to the community. And just yesterday, I had a meeting with a lady in town who has connections to 6 other families of Ukrainians in Olds. So now we have over 8 families in Olds. We're creating a spreadsheet so that we can figure out who these people are, what their needs are, and what their resources are, so that we can, the plan is to have an open house for all of our newcomers, to take them on a bus tour around town, to show them some of the resources that are here. The fact that the splash park is open free of charge to children to come and play, supervised of course by their parents, but these are things that they don't even have access to in the Ukraine. We showed them the swimming pool in town and they were blown away. We showed them the ice arena in town, and again, a facility that's going to be open to their use when that time comes in the fall, that they were unaware of and totally in awe of. These are these things that we take for granted as we drive to work, as we pass by these amazing facilities. We don't even realize that our Ukrainian newcomers have no idea what we have at our doorstep. So I think a lot of our responsibility is to show them the resources that are available for them. We have learned lots of things. Like I've talked to Jerry many times about things like where to get the work permit, where to get your work permit amended. If it needs to be changed, I'm leaving early tomorrow morning to head to the Calgary airport to get one of the gentleman's work permits amended. It wasn't done quite correctly when he first arrived in Calgary. So that's something that's going to happen with me tomorrow morning. It all started with that email and that conversation in our community. And, you know, I just have to share that yesterday I got a phone call out of the blue. Lots of people know me in town, but anyways, out of the blue, a farmer in town had a quarter of a cow frozen, ready for donation to our 2 Ukrainian families. Mary, have you got freezer space? I want to bring it over tonight. So I had the Ukrainians come over to my house and we were able to find freezer space for them. And the generosity of volunteers, of community citizens who just want to reach out and help is overwhelming. And you know, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy. When Peter first told me about his relatives coming, we've done this before with some South African physicians who've come to Olds. It's a long haul, no doubt, but it's so rewarding and it just makes your heart smile to know that we're able to help others that are in such duress. I guess the only other thing that I wanted to add is for us to remember that apart from our Indigenous neighbors, we all came from somewhere. And it might have been recent and it might have been a couple of generations ago, but nevertheless, we all came from somewhere. And when we arrived, when our relatives arrived, someone was there for us. Someone provided that meal, that warm roof over their head. And I think it's our responsibility now to help others who are coming to our country under such duress. So again, rural communities are very different. I would reach out to your local municipality, local food bank, other service clubs. I'm speaking to the Kiwanis Club very shortly. They want to know my story. They want to help out. So there's lots of people that can help and we just need to reach out and share our opportunity with them. So Judy, I hope that that's maybe covered some of the things from a rural perspective, certainly different than urban, but I really appreciate all the hard work that's happening in the urban centers to support our numbers as well. As a team, we can certainly do a lot. And this evening is just fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you especially for highlighting not only the challenges from the rural areas, but the tremendous resources and gifts that we have too in smaller communities in our country. Ria, I have noted your question about, Ria has posted a question which is asking, how can Shelterbox help? So if all of you could keep that in mind, if you have any thoughts about that, Ria, we will get to that question. I just wanted to let you know. Our last speakers are Fleha Ahmed and Chantel Barber, who are again speaking from a smaller community perspective. And this is what's happening in Cochrane. And there has been, just as I understand it, a tremendous momentum and experience here. And we have some Rotarians from the Cochrane Club actually on this call tonight. So again, just another perspective on what's happening in the community. And this is not a Rotary initiative. This is coming from the grassroots of the community. So thank you so much, Chantel and Fleha, for being here, and we'll give you the floor now.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mohammed, for extending the invite. I appreciate it. So as that old quote went, that it takes a village to raise a child, I feel it takes a community to welcome a newcomer. And that is what Cochrane has shown over and over again, but especially since we're focusing on the Ukrainian families. So I am Fleha Ahmed. I work with Rocky View Immigrant Services. It's a rural branch project of Calgary Catholic Immigration Society. And I also chair the Cochrane Immigrant Service Committee in Cochrane. So anyone who's new to Cochrane will stream through me for all settlement services. And then according to their needs, I will refer them. And with me is Chantal. She was with me. Okay, so I'll carry on. She has a little baby, so she probably stepped away. So Chantal is one of the brave volunteers who stepped forward to help out with this initiation. So how we have started it is that once the families are in Cochrane, they will connect with me. But prior to arriving in Cochrane, Chantal does a lot of that work. So she will help pick and choose the host families. She will do a little bit of assessment of safety measures. She will help them with the, like, let's say it's 1 a.m. and a family lands at the airport. She's usually the person who they would connect to give them an emergency stay overnight. And then in the morning, we take it from there. So when back a few months ago, when we found out that the Ukrainian refugees are coming to Cochrane, we had an estimation of maybe 12, 15 families. But boy, were we wrong. To date, we have about 67 families and more are coming. So we were really not prepared. But with the community effort, the volunteers, the donations, and the service providers collaborating, I think we just did a remarkable job in controlling the situation. So when the client comes, the families, their urgent need is from the airport to a safe situation. So we have one of our partners, Helping Hands. They're a volunteer-based committee, and what they do is they help with any delivering furniture or giving any urgent service, that they'll drive a person from point A to point B. So we have them, and then we have other volunteers lined up. After that, for the long-term need, Chantal is the person to connect. So she will find a temporary residence for them. It could be in her own house, or it could be someone she knows, or it could be one of the kind community members who are on her list of we could host a family. From there, then we give them a food hamper and some clothing for that overnight. Let's say it's a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, everything is closed, all the services. So they do have that initial emergency funds met. Once Monday comes, then they connect with me. So I sort of then guide them and I refer them. And the first agency, after doing my own assessment and helping them with their social insurance number, with their Alberta health card, the family doctors, their medical checkups, all the initial needs which they need, I help them with. And then I will refer them to the FCSS. The FCSS is the Family and Community Support Service. Then they will move forward with referring them to the food bank, which signs them up with a food hamper. And then of course the sheds are always gracious with giving food any time of the day. And then they give a cold bus pass, which they will have access to travel around Cochrane, now that we finally, after many years, got transportation there. And also they give some, if needed, like a gift card and then a clothesline card. The clothesline is a used or donated items there, but they get to get a free shopping spree. And I like that a bit more than donations, because it sort of gives you a little more value to what you're getting, and you get to pick what you like, sizes that you like. It's not like whatever you're donated, you just have to squeeze into. So not only due to space, but also due to that factor, we encourage everybody to donate to the Clothesline or Home Treasures, which is a furniture shop. So when these families are coming and they need clothing, and they can have that choice of picking and choosing. The other services, of course, the employment. So we have Prospect. They will help with their resumes. And then so the younger people, they're more interested in Tim Hortons, McDonald's, those first-time jobs. And then if they're a little more professional, then they're willing to go into, a lot of them I find they have like engineering backgrounds or construction backgrounds, and the demand is high. So I feel I noticed two things, that one, they're eager to work, and two, people are eager to hire them. So it's a win-win for both sides. Language is a barrier, and because of the summer months, we don't have the ESL classes running. So what we did is we have a group of ESL teachers who are teaching the language at the Boys and Girls Club. They were gracious enough to give us out a room, and it's Thursday evenings and Sunday afternoons. So there's two advantages with that. One, they're learning the language, and the other, it's a little social time for them to sort of connect with each other, share how they're feeling, their emotions. I feel when a person is new, they're so overwhelmed with what they came from, and it's a safe place, and let's get the documents done, and that whole settlement process occupies their mind. But when I meet my clients after 3, 4, 5 months like that, it starts sinking in, and that's when they really need that emotional and mental support, because then they start missing what they left behind and how they left it behind, and all those emotions kick in. And then, of course, one other thing I would love to highlight is on June 17, we had a Welcome Ukrainian event. And of course, all the food, everything was donated. And we were just inviting the families and thinking it's a first event. We weren't sure how it would play. We had close to about 140 people in that hall. So the families came, the host families came, community members came. It was such a beautiful night. And I feel they really felt, a lot of them, that they were back in Ukraine because of just that community connection. So it was really lovely. And yeah, I think I covered everything, but we are, like Mohammed said, every day is a new learning. So with the government introducing new packages and new fundings and new ideas, we are sort of playing with it and fitting it into our rural communities and making the best of it. I do always get a feedback that the warmth and the welcome they get in a rural community, they don't get that in the big cities. So it's a plus. We sort of walk the clients through, and it's a more personal base. So it does feel good. And what else? Yeah, so we are getting a lot of donations, and actually we were talking with FCSS and the Rotary Club in how we can stream these donations through the proper places, and so that the families coming can access them, and the people who are donating will feel confident that their donations are being justified.
I think
Thank you, Flia. Chantal, yes.
Chantal, I don't know what I said. Now you'll just have to pick up from whatever.
According to Judy's time budget, I have 2 minutes, so I'll do what I can. So I work for no one. I am a volunteer. I'm new to Alberta. I moved here in January. I have a Ukrainian background. My mom is half Ukrainian. So when the war started, I previously was a nurse. So I wanted to go volunteer, and my husband said no. So I said, how can I help otherwise? I was interested in hosting a family. I looked, there's 100 different ways you can find a family from Ukraine. There's different websites, Airbnb, everything. So I started contacting government agencies and UCC saying, okay, so what's the best way to ensure I'm hosting the right family? there was no guidance. So as Jerry said, I really echo a lot of the concerns that he had, because I had them too. So I have a background in population and community health. So I really wanted to avoid all of the issues that kind of Mary and Jerry have shared, and make sure that it was a smooth process upon arrival, and make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing the T's. So moving forward, what I kind of do now is I consider myself a connector. So I have Ukrainian families that I'm connected with, and then I have Cochrane families, Bears Paw families, Bragg Creeks families, Didsbury families. I have families all over Rocky View, and they reach out to me based on either an internet article or whatever. And I have a Google form that they complete, which provides a little bit of information. And then based on that, I kind of create a connection to avoid liability for myself. I don't really say a placement or a match. What happens on either end is I video call with both people, then I do a video call with the group as a whole, just so everybody can get to know each other. Something else I do that is a little bit different than any of the other agencies that are in the city, or like CCIS, UCC, the Diaspora, all of these larger placement agencies, is I consider the level of support that the host has to offer, and I consider the level of support that the family needs. So let's say that the family speaks zero English and has not worked in 6 years. Well, I'm certainly not going to place them with a family that works 12 hours a day, isn't home, and isn't able to chauffeur them around to certain English classes. So that's something that my professional history and volunteer history has allowed me to be able to make sure that the placements I'm making are actually good connections, because it's great to be able to provide housing to these evacuees, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we're creating a positive contribution to our communities. I want people that are going to want to stay here, that are going to want to work here, or at the very least are going to be appropriate contributions. So I put a lot of effort into that. Another thing I do is just when I'm talking with the Ukrainian family, I ensure that they were actually within Ukraine in the last year. Some people have been living in Europe for 10 years, but because they were born in Ukraine, they're using this as a hotspot to come on over. So I want to make sure that with the limited resources we all have, that I'm helping the right people. In addition to that, there was a comment made by Mohammed saying men are not allowed, but that is not true. There is actually exception to that rule. So if you have 3 or more children, the husbands are allowed to come. If they're a caregiver for elderly or a single parent, then they are also allowed to come. They're exempt, as well as if they have a mental or physical handicap that causes them unable to fight, then they're also allowed to come. So there are some considerations there. So when we were kind of rummaging through this, I noticed a lot of what Jerry did. There's a lot of ad hoc support. There's a lot of small agencies doing a lot of small things. And what I really wanted when I realized a lot of people were reaching out for me to help is to create a very smooth process. And I think we have a well-oiled machine here. Before people even arrive, they know about FLIA. I hold the hosts accountable, as well as the families accountable, that they are required to meet with the settlement services upon arrival. That is the most important thing. This is the only government link they have to where they are. When they arrive in Canada, there is no address arrival. We have no idea where they go. When Mohammed and Jerry were talking about those numbers of who's here and who's not, I know tons of people that have left and have gone to BC or Saskatchewan, but Alberta was their first stop, and vice versa, people that have landed in BC and are now in Alberta. That's why you're getting those discrepancies. So it's really important for me that I do connect them with a settlement service so that we can create this flow of process. And at the same time, I'm not getting paid. So I want to ensure I'm not duplicating any efforts. So if there are agencies offering supports that I would otherwise be offering, I want to make sure I'm connecting them to the right people. So once I've connected them with FLIA, you kind of know what FLIA does. And then on the flip side, what I've been doing is filling in the gaps. So like she said, there's no English lessons. So I talked to Boys and Girls Club. I got the space for free 2 days a week. I had people reaching out about ESL. So I've got volunteer teachers. We're looking at working with the Rotary to potentially fund some ESL textbooks in the meantime. On our last, we only had 2 classes so far, and we had, I think it was like 28 people come for English lessons, which is pretty great. Our last half hour of that class is dedicated to just, fellowship, just people visiting, getting to know each other, building connections, because this is their community and it's not just us that needs to make them welcome. They also need to make their own friends and their own connections to give them a little piece of home too. was one other thing I wanted to mention here. Oh, some things that aren't always clear are which banks to choose, which cell phone plans to use. Those are things that governments can't specifically advise, of course, because they're private agencies. So I also created a spreadsheet which advises which each of the banks are offering, what each of the cell phone companies are offering, which the cell phone companies are really offering very little. It's kind of ad hoc on some of them are offering waiving, you know, the $50 startup fee. In Ukraine, a cell phone is $4 a month, unlimited data. So you can see how we are taken here in Canada with our cell phone plan. So things like that to consider. I really try and make it so that the hosts, when they are connected, are completely set for the rest of their ride. I make sure that they have an agreement of a set amount of time once they upon arrival, so they know that the family is going to be there for 3 months, and after that, they're responsible to transition. Which so far we have a few families that are looking to transition anytime now. I've also connected with some of the property management companies in Cochrane to see if we could create something with them. I'm having more success with the local privately owned houses that are used as rentals rather than the larger agencies. There's been some tracking of the larger agencies that are offering, say, 3 months free rent on a 1-year lease. However, they're amortizing those first 3 months over the last 9 months. So they're actually getting their money back, which is kind of not ideal. So trying to support them in that way. One thing that's awesome about being rural, like Flia and Mary shared, was that there's less resources to navigate, and people can't avoid me. So I certainly will call people and ask what their role is. And a lot of times I've had to light some fires under some people to ensure that these people are now a member of their community, and whether the process worked for people that are here before, processes need to be adapted to the newcomers that are here now. An example, a big issue we've had is people that arrive and they have a 10-day quarantine. Okay, so how are they supposed to get a food hamper if they're supposed to come for a 1-hour in-person intake? There was no process for that, and I was basically told, well, that's not the process. And I said, okay, well, then what's going to happen is we're going to have to fundraise, we're going to have to find storage, we're going to have to duplicate all of these efforts because we can't do a video call. So things need to be adapted on the government end there, and they have been, to my pleasure, that I'm pleased to hear, but it's been quite a process and learning curve. So I certainly don't want to take up any more time here, but feel free to ask me any questions about anything. And that's it for me.
Well, what an amazing story. And I'm lucky enough to live in your neighborhood.
I want to congratulate both of you. Chantal and Flia, I just think you're running a phenomenal rural model that should be duplicated. All the little problems you talked about, I've been through them. We're moving from the temporary to permanent housing, but the two of you have come up with solutions for almost every little problem that can come up. And I congratulate you because you're the model, as far as I'm concerned, for rural Alberta.
That's why they're here.
Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate that. And we're still working at it. Me and Chantal and I didn't know each other prior to this, and now we're like best buddies.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go to.
I want to add one thing.
Yes.
When you start moving from temporary housing to permanent housing, you generally need a good jobs, and often the jobs for the men require a driver's license. Okay, so if you need some help manipulating through that process, especially the insurances, I can give you some help.
Okay, great. We've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to start with you, Steve. Levitt is asking, so coming from a rural community, how can we get involved? How can we get started is what Steve is asking. And I don't know if you want to add more to that question, Steve, but we're going to start with that one. And then we've got a couple of other questions. Steve, is that an okay reiteration of your question? Has he gone?
I don't think they have the ability to talk.
Oh, right. Okay. So, yes.
Sorry, Judy.
That's okay.
Everyone should have the possibility of unmuting themselves by going to their window or what they have open and click on probably 3 dots, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, so again, Steve's question is, and he comes from a rural community, how can you get started? How can you get involved? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
I could certainly speak to that. So if he's interested in hosting, there are many agencies that are larger agencies, and they do some decent vetting, and that would be like St. Vlad's through Calgary, the Ukrainian diaspora. CCIS and UCC, unfortunately, is a little bit of a slower process. They haven't actually matched too many people. And certainly you can get in contact with me and I can guide you the right way. One gap that I will identify and would share with all of you is just that connection to FLIA upon arrival is not, I have not seen it from almost any other agency. So some of the calls I get at 6, 7 in the morning from people going, okay, I got a family dropped off by X, Y, and Z at my house. What do I do now? And they were provided zero guidance on what to do with the family after. So just prepare yourself and educate yourself kind of on the things we shared and ensure that those resources are available to you. Otherwise, you have to consider the level of support that the family you're taking in is going to accommodate where you are rurally and what you have to offer them.
So with respect to your offer, Chantal, can you put your email address in the chat so that Steve has it? That would be great. So Rhea Graham has asked 2 questions, and they both have to do with shelter. I think immediate housing shelter. And her first question was, how can Shelter Box help, or can Shelter Box help? And then her second one was an observation that the Calgary School Board, she heard us closing some schools. And is that any kind of facility that could be leveraged? So I don't know if somebody has some thoughts to that question. Yes.
I am working with housing right now that has to be renovated. Okay, the difficulty there is you go through such a legal process. I have to get occupancy permits from the city, and yet I've got room for 100 people. But when you start to dig into using a refitted building and all the legal stuff that goes with it, number one, I don't think there's a Rotary Club who can afford the insurance.
Right.
So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm in the middle of one right now, and I need occupancy permits before I can get get any insurance. And so it just opens a really big can of worms, especially for larger groups. And Rotary is not really that good at what I call hands-on in that area. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but I have found it's very difficult.
Right. Okay, and then we had another question. Someone was asking whether anyone has used or has thought of using the organization called Drive Able or 211, or I'm not sure how that's pronounced, Alberta, in terms of supporting people's transportation needs, their initial transportation needs.
So Judy, I'll just start by saying, back when the pandemic started, I was invited to sit on an Alberta Health Services board representing our district as district governor. And one of the things that we talked about quite extensively was the Drive Able organization has volunteers that drive individuals around the city if they aren't able to drive or whatever. And they were used extensively during the whole COVID pandemic, taking people to appointments and that kind of thing. I know that driving is a huge challenge for our Ukrainian newcomers, and that's very taxing on volunteers. And I know that Drive Able and Alberta 211 are predominantly active in urban centers. And I'm just wondering, maybe, Jerry, maybe this is a comment for yourself. Are you aware of these organizations being accessed by our newcomers? Because it's certainly out there and available if people need that kind of support.
In Calgary, they overrun the supply is overrun by the need.
Yeah.
Okay, because like, for example, on a Saturday afternoon, you will find over 1,000 people will show up at St. Vladimir's. So the numbers are so big. So we use a lot of Rotarians or senior citizens that'll say, I'll take this trip, I'll take that trip. Okay.
Mhm. Okay.
And I'm finding that a lot of the Ukrainians, after a week or two, they will have found somebody who will help them,
Mhm.
especially if they're well connected. The way Chantel and Flea have their setup where they're already making relationships, they begin to make their own relationships. In other words, rather than be dependent on us to create a solution, many of them start looking for solutions, and they're very ingenious people.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
transportation, number one, remember, they can't get a license easily,
Mhm.
okay? And you're going through that right now.
None of our Ukrainians are driving, so it's all pretty much Rotarians and community members that are driving them. And you know, everything in Olds, you need to be driven. It's
Yeah.
not like jumping on a bus someplace. We don't
Yeah.
have a bus system.
I
Mhm.
just wanted to add to that. I do have a copy of the Alberta driver's guide translated to Ukrainian if anyone wants it or
Oh, I
does not
would,
have it, because I've provided that to some people to study with, because it's a huge barrier. I've had hosts give cars to the families and they could drive it for 90 days. But after their 90 days are up, if they don't take that test, then they lose their license. So it's available. If anybody wants to shoot me an email, I can give it to you.
And
would-
also our local library is helping with preparing for the driving.
Yeah.
Mhm. 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 So Cliff is asking Flea if you'll also share your email. You probably saw that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that Keith Johnson is, got a real hunger for borscht and pierogies, etc. Wondering if we could have a Ukrainian restaurant in Cochrane soon.
That would be nice. Many of them are amazing chefs. That's another thing I learned.
Exactly.
The one area you're probably going to find raise its head now, we're seeing it more and more in the past 2 or 3 weeks. The majority of people are women with children, and 9 times out of 10, their husband is in somewheres at the front, in some facet active. And so the psychological pressure is starting to become overbearing. And so
Yeah.
now we're starting to see quite a large number, it's approaching, my figures from the Alberta government is near 10% are having severe psychological issues. Now that they have got into some kind of accommodation and they're relaxing a little bit, we're finding that care or guidance or counseling is raising its head. And so if you happen to have someone who's a counselor of some sort and bilingual, keep that person in mind, because that's a need that the curve is going like this on the need.
Right. That makes sense. For
Thank
sure.
you, Jerry. I so agree with that. And that is what I'm seeing. There is a counselor who could volunteer. I know it's asking a lot because their schedule is so demanding as well. But if someone does come across it, please connect them with me, because I am seeing a high need of 2 things. One, the dental, and the other is the therapy.
You can get, there's an emergency number with the Alberta government, okay? When you contact them, they will give you a line to a counselor, okay? But they want to deal with the most severe. So keep in mind, if it's a toenail problem, don't call. But there are some pretty severe, I mean, I've seen some that are on the edge of breakdown.
Mhm.
And so we're beginning to get that's sort of the next hill we have to climb.
Mhm. For sure. So Steve again is a message to Jerry and Mohammed about Gateway. Have you used Gateway? Is Steve's question.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
So I actually do not work in Calgary, but I do attend the provincial meeting in the Calgary Secretariat for the Ukrainian Secretariat that's meeting on almost, I think, twice or bi-weekly. And I see them and I see that they are big engaged in they are providing this rubber round needs assessment that happened. But I think what Gary talked about earlier, in the sense that there are a lot going on, and it's very difficult to do it in this way that there is one entry where there is a needs assessment and then referrals in the background. So in smaller communities is different. I don't think they have that presence in smaller communities, but in Calgary, I know that they are very engaged.
I like the way Flia and Chantel have done. They have picked up experience on almost every facet. Listening to Chantel, I think, oh, I had that problem, and I had that problem, and I had that problem. I mean, I know she's been through them all. Now, every situation she faces, she doesn't use all the same answers. I can tell she picks the answers that fits the situation. And I think that's what I find when I'm listening to them too. I think they're absolute total gems, because they're not trying to fit the refugee into their package. They're saying what parts of the package help that situation. And that's the sense I get from them. And I think they're on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. There was one thing I just wanted to add when Fleahead did bring up dental. So one other issue that we've come across, speaking about issues and problem solving, is a lot of the private healthcare providers like vision and dental, they haven't a hot clue on how to bill or treat, or what should be pro bono and what shouldn't, for emergency dental and emergency vision. So they are not eligible for that federal government support, as Jerry said previously. And a lot of them thought that they could bill under that, but they can't. Alberta's government website guides you to Alberta Supports. I called Alberta Supports. They told me to use the federal program. I said, they're not eligible for this federal program. So with a few more calls, we learned that there is an emergent crisis medical treatment fund. However, it involves a pre-approval of like 2 to 5 business days. Now, if you've ever had a really sore tooth, can you wait 2 to 5 business days to get it fixed? So what I did is I kind of gathered this information, connected with the clinic managers of the dental clinics in Cochrane, and provided that information with them. And then we actually have a Facebook group called Cochrane Supporting Hosts and Families from Ukraine. And Flia and I moderate it, so we ensure there's no misinformation, and we provide updates on social things, as well as the hosts and the Ukrainian families can connect. But in there, I did post, if there is a dental or vision issue, ensure that they call the clinic first and advise that they are a family from Ukraine, as opposed to just showing up, because a $1,000 bill when you only have $3,000 isn't ideal. So a lot of these places are willing to do sliding scale. They are willing to do some pro bono. At the same time, we don't want to exhaust our own community. So it's really important that we are offering them some time to have some accountability to come up with a plan. So for these places like Olds, like for you, Mary, I would encourage you to reach out to some of those private practitioners in your small town already, anticipating some of these problems, so that when the time arises and they need some of these services, that you're not kind of stranded trying to sort that out. In addition, talking about fundraising, we're working with FCSS on creating a private allocation of funds dedicated to support of Ukrainians. And in that slush fund will be for transport passes, for ESL, but in addition, vision and dental, so that we can support our local providers that are providing these services as well.
If you can get those services in a proper sequence, if you try to do the federal government medical too early, you're stuck with the bill. But if you wait the 2-week period after you applied for Alberta healthcare, and there are 3 labs in Calgary that I know will honor that after you've received your final paper, not the interim one, but the final one. Then you get your x-rays for free and your blood tests for free, okay? But if you came before you got the final one, you get a bill. So we're finding timing becomes as important as anything. And you have 90 days from date of entry to complete that last medical.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Go ahead, Mohammed, please.
That's and it's actually just a thought in talking about the dental, and I'm not sure yet, but I wonder if once that Alberta provincial support kicks in on July 25th, they would also be qualified for the medical benefit that sometimes comes with it. So
they haven't announced the program yet. I mean, I know they've announced saying it's coming, but the details haven't come yet.
Yeah.
So my husband just passed me a note in terms of getting back to the mental health with an interesting idea, is that, of course, in Cochrane, our neighbors are the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, and we also have up to 2,000 Indigenous people living in Cochrane itself. And our Rotary Club is just really beginning to work with that group in terms of bringing people together who are saying, you know, we had no way of knowing how to reach out to each other or to build a community here. The skills and processes that Indigenous people have for using talking circles and other strategies, traditional strategies for helping people with mental health issues and for building community is something that we should talk about. So, you know, let's set an opportunity to talk about that and see if we can build that connection, because it would be such an amazing thing to have our Indigenous neighbors and friends and colleagues working with this group. So just throwing that out there, we could talk about that.
I also want to add there is one of CCIS's projects called the Refugee Resiliency Center, and they have done some work around mental health and counseling for youth and for adults. Maybe Falia and I can connect with Rick and see if they would be interested in exploring work with the Ukrainians and see if there are some resources that could be used there.
Mm-hmm. So friends, I see we're just really getting going with all these great ideas and you know, building connections with each other, and that certainly is one of the intentions of this webinar. It's now 8:25, and I just want to respect everybody's time. We've already been on the call for almost an hour and a half. I think that as a district, we need to have a conversation shortly about how we can continue to provide some kind of a service to the district in terms of figuring these things out, learning from each other.
I want to add something about just what you're saying, the district. I think most of you know that that I applied for a district grant to get our program up and running, okay? And we've been dispersing and matching with local money and so on. But I've now, because Jamie suggested I apply for a second grant, which is $31,000. And I had talked to our team and we wanted to highlight somehow we match financial support needs in the rural part of our district. So this has been how my team is looking at the second grant. I've been told by past DG and the current one at the district conference that we would be eligible for at least 2 application runs of this 31,700, okay? And just letting you know, we have spent the first one, obviously, it went very fast, but our team is talking about how can we add energy to people like you. In other words, there are little things like Mary reached out to us to get some financial help. Okay. Now, Flia and Chantel has got a fundraising, but I know for a fact the moment you transition from temporary housing to more permanent housing, the big bucks are going to come. Okay. And like we're in that phase, and it doesn't take long for a few $1,000s to go. So I'm letting you know because we are expecting a second district grant, and we want to focus on supporting smaller communities. Okay, so keep that in mind.
Thank you.
And, you know, we could certainly speak. I can't speak for the Cochrane Rotary Club because, you know, obviously that's a collective decision, but we could certainly think about district grant as well. I mean, anyway, we'll have lots more conversations, and I'm sure there'll be something else that comes back to the district to talk about what we've learned from this session, what we've learned from each other, and what our next steps might be. So, Rick, thank you for your help again, and thank you to everyone. Yeah, this is not the end.
Thanks, Judy. I would just like to say, wow, I learned so much, and that's one of the purposes of these monthly learning webinars. I want to thank the panelists tonight that shared their story, shared their advice, dealt with problem solving in a big way, and it's a new journey for a lot of us. So I also want to thank the 26 participants that joined us this evening in support of this webinar, and let you know that I'm pleased to say that the District Learning and Development Committee has decided to continue with the Club Learning webinars this Rotary year. Our next one will be in September. We're going to take August off. And look for an email, Rotarians, from me next week, likely reaching out to clubs, Rotarians, and their district committees to look at coming up with a schedule of meaningful, relevant, and important and timely topics that can be covered each month for the benefit of our Rotary family. So again, thank you everyone for being here this evening, and I wish you a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.